personality in the show. Well, in the comic, he uses a Foot Clan for drug smuggling, selling weapons and assassinations, and was a ruthless murderer, a no-nonsense villain. And actually, in the initial 5 episodes that were released for Season 1, Shredder is actually quite cunning and dangerous. However, as the series went on, Shredder's personality did seem to change a little bit. He was still evil, but he did always seem to fail to defeat the Turtles, although he did at times seem to be the better fighter. As soon as he was beaten in the fight, he would run off like a coward, and it wasn't unusual to see him have a tantrum if things weren't going his way. Quite a change from the violent killer in the comic books. And then we have the Ninja Turtles themselves, whose characters had changed a little since their comic book origins. Michelangelo, for instance, in the comic books, he was more easygoing than his brothers, but also with a serious tone and ready to fight. However, in the cartoon, he was more fun-loving, and given a bigger role, he was also known as a party dude. In fact, he was even given the title as a party dude in the main theme. Mikey also had a weakness for pizza, even though all of the other Turtles had a weakness for pizza too, but they didn't seem to have as much of a weakness for pizza as Mikey did. He loved to joke around, he spoke with a surfer dude slang, and was constantly used in the show for constant comic relief. And it is said that the voice actor was responsible for the Cowabunga catchphrase, which wasn't actually scripted. And then we have Leonardo, who in the comic, he isn't actually referred to as a leader at first, but always led his brothers into battle, and is said to be the more skillful turtle and highly disciplined. Now, in the cartoon, he is more or likely the same. It does actually say it right there in the theme song, Leonardo is the leader. In the cartoon, he can come across as bossy, and this can annoy his brothers from time to time. He is sometimes portrayed as the goody two-shoes, and he can also be the teacher's pet, but it has been proven in some episodes that the Turtles rely on him a lot for his leadership skills. And then we have Donatello. Now, in the comics, Donnie is actually portrayed as the second in command, and was quite the handyman. He was quite good at fixing things. In fact, in the early episodes of the comic books, there's a storyline where they have to retreat to a farmhouse, quite similar to the movie, which we'll get onto later. And he was actually seen around the farmhouse fixing many different items, such as a farmhouse boiler, and he also builds a windmill and a water wheel to provide electricity. Now, in the cartoon, he is viewed as a tech geek genius who can pretty much make anything he puts his mind to. He builds the turtle wagon, he builds a blimp, he also builds the turtle comms, the walkie-talkies that they use, and he can also invent portals to other dimensions, as well as many other out-of-this-world creations that nicely move the plot along in the cartoon. And the last turtle is Raphael, and in the comic, Raphael is a big hothead, always first to fight and prone to anger. He is also the most violent of the four. But in the cartoon, Raphael's personality is extremely different than any other version released since. In the theme tune, he is introduced as a cool but rude turtle, and he's the most sarcastic of all his brothers, and is quick to poke fun, and his violent tendencies are completely toned down, and he is used a lot for comic relief, along with his brother Michelangelo. And another character I'd like to talk about is Casey Jones. Now, he wasn't actually in the first 5 episodes, but I think he is an important character to talk about when it comes to the 1987 series. Now, in the comics, Casey Jones is actually the hot-head vigilante, actually quite similar to Raphael in many ways, who likes to dispense his own kind of justice on the criminals. And when it actually comes to the cartoon, I wouldn't actually say they toned him down, I said they actually turned it up a notch. In the cartoon, Casey Jones is a muscle-bound, unhinged vigilante who wears a hockey mask, like in the comics. But in the cartoons, the relationship between him and the Turtles is different. Instead of being a friend of the Turtles, which he is a friend of the Turtles, but he is more of a nuisance, and the Turtles often had to calm him down. It's actually funny watching these episodes. As a kid, I didn't realise this, but the voice actor for Casey Jones sounds a lot like a parody of Clint Eastwood, which is actually quite funny when you listen to it. I mean, if you can't remember what Casey Jones sounded like in the 1987 series, or you've never heard him at all, I just go over to YouTube and just type it in and have a listen. It is quite comical listening to some of the scenes. Now, as I said, Casey Jones didn't play such a central role in the cartoons as he did in the comics, and he only actually appeared in 5 episodes out of the 193 that actually aired on the television. And next I want to mention the differences of the Foot Clan between the comic and the cartoon, because I feel it will segue nicely into what I want to discuss next, which is the violence that is depicted in the show. In the comic, the Foot Clan are the most feared clan of warriors in Japan, skilled and dangerous, and were particularly good at assassinations. In the cartoon, they were changed considerably. Obviously, they can't have assassinations in cartoons. Although in the cartoon, the Shredder does actually bring Foot Clan members over from Japan, it is presumed that somewhere between coming to the US and meeting the Turtles, Krang must have created his own robotic Foot Clan. In episode 1 of the cartoon, it seems as though the Turtles are actually holding back when they are first confronted by the Foot. But as soon as they discover that they are robots, they seem to be more happy with this revelation and unleash their weapons on the Foot, easily beating them, and throughout the series, the Foot never really pose much of a threat and are easily beaten. Now, the reason the Foot were robots was obvious. It's so that the Turtles had an excuse to use their weapons. After all, you couldn't use your weapons to stab a living villain on a kids' TV show. But robots are fine. In fact, the Turtles' weapons were never actually used to cause harm. Instead, they were used to help them in different ways, such as cutting a net to fall on the enemy, or throw the weapon to disable a trap, or something of that sort. But even though the cartoon was really kid-friendly, it would seem that some countries were still not convinced and went on to heavily edit some of the action scenes, especially the UK. Now, in the UK at the time, the word ninja was taken out of the title and was replaced with the word hero, as it was thought the word ninja was far too violent a word to have in the title of a cartoon in the UK. So the cartoon in the UK was called Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, and throughout my childhood, that's how I knew it. Also, any scene of Michelangelo using his nunchucks were also cut from the cartoon, because at the time, nunchucks were also illegal in the UK. Also, the intro was heavily cut, removing a few Mikey shots with his nunchucks. Another thing removed from the main theme tune was the word ninja, just as it was removed from the titles, and the word hero was inserted into the theme tune. And the word ninja was also replaced with the word hero on all merchandise released in the UK. Along with the nunchucks, they were also removed from all merchandise, including early video games. It wasn't actually until season 4 when the people responsible for making these cartoons actually addressed the issue of the censorship, and they started to give Michelangelo a grappling hook to fight with instead of the nunchucks to avoid any messy editing done by TV networks. And then the cartoon kept the silly, wacky fun tone for many seasons to come. That is until season 8. At the time, the X-Men cartoon was doing very well, and it was a much darker, serious series than the Turtles was. So from season 8, the Turtles cartoon had a big change, visually and story-wise. Although still in the same timeline as all the other episodes that came before it, the episodes that came after it became darker, and it got a brand new title sequence and song. The title sequence had clips from the 1990 movie included in it. The design of the Turtles also changed. They looked less child-friendly and more meaner, and the stakes were higher. This was no longer a cartoon where the bad guys constantly failed. In one episode, Shredder actually succeeds at blowing up the Channel 6 news building and reducing it to rubble. And I think, if I remember rightly, that's how that episode actually ended, on a somber note rather than a happy one. Now, the final 3 seasons of the Turtles cartoon are known as the Red Sky episodes, and this is due to the changes in the colour of the sky in the cartoon, which were all now coloured a dark, moody red. A bit like the New Adventures of Batman, they had a similar colour palette as well for their episodes. Now, whilst we're talking about the cartoons, and before we move away from the cartoons, I think it's worth mentioning that there was a second comic book that was started, and it was more child-friendly and followed the cartoons more closely, but diverged by issue 5. The comic series was known as the Archie Comics run, and it ran from 1988 to 1995 and had 72 issues as well as annuals. And now back to the cartoon, it actually ran for an amazing 10 seasons before it actually came to an end. The cartoon went on to be the longest running cartoon TV series of all time. That was until a few years later when it was beaten by The Simpsons. And so the last episode of the 1987 Ninja Turtle cartoon run ended on the 2nd of November 1996. But something that I failed to mention happened in 1990 during the height of the cartoon, when it was decided that the world would be treated to a full-length, live-action Ninja Turtles movie. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about in part 2 of the Pop Culture Pedestal's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles deep dive. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified when the next episode is out. And thank you very much for joining me, and I really hope you enjoyed the very first episode of Pop Culture Pedestal. And I hope you can join us for part 2. So until then, take care, and I'll see you next time, dudes and dudettes. See you soon.